Now available in paperback and e-readers. Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. In the 1980s, black people were obsessed with conformity. And as they were obsessed with fitting themselves into white society, this did devastating damage to the way black men and black women related to each other and how we had relationships with each other. And as we wound up trying to fit ourselves into white society, sadly, instead of black men and black women coming together, we wound up being torn completely apart. And instead of there being a foundation of black on black love, we got a whole culture of self-hatred. Now, this whole obsession with conformity started in the era of the civil rights movement. Now, during the civil rights movement, black people were looking to go out here and fight for our civil rights in the beginning, fighting to get equal rights under the law, and also looking to go out and look to get equal access to tax dollars to ensure that our children would receive a good education from public schools in our local districts, because they would be able to get the funding they had been denied for many years, and also look to improve the quality of life of black people so that we could go out here and have good things like quality roads, have things like good hospitals, have things like good libraries and good public schools. What we wanted was an equal allocation of tax dollars to our communities, and we wanted an equal protections under the law that we were supposed to be guaranteed as U.S. citizens that were given to us in the 13th and 14th Amendments. That's what black people were fighting for as related to the civil rights movement. But sadly, when it came down to black people, as we entered the 1960s, what happened was a lot of us got distracted by looking to gain social acceptance into white society when they offered integration to black people, hoping to give us social currency instead of looking to allow us to be able to enter into the society and be a part of its entire economic base and be able to compete in that society without any sort of reprisal. That's what black people wanted as related to things. But however, many people got caught up in the quest for social currency and social acceptance. And as they got caught up in this quest for social currency and social acceptance, what happened with black people is that as they became distracted, eventually they became spellbound. And as they became spellbound, they were looking to fit themselves into these black boxes that were acceptable to white people. And as they were looking to fit themselves in these black boxes that were acceptable to white people, instead of people looking to accept black people as themselves, what we had was a culture of people looking to conform to standards and look to conform to the white standards of society. Now, much of this was done because what happened is, as white supremacy misled black people with integration, a lot of them were able to create a divide between black men and black women. And as they made this divide between black men and black women, what happened was black people again stopped seeing each other as coming together, but look to try to fit themselves into this society, looking to meet white standards. And this was started by looking to try to find ways to minimize the black man as they look to talk to the black woman. And as white feminists talked to black women, they wanted to be socially accepted. And as they wanted to be socially accepted, they looked to conform to the standard of the white feminist, not understanding that the white feminist was a part of the bottom of white society and not the top position that many black women thought that they were going to be. Now, as black women took on the whole idea of looking to conform to white society, some of the poorer black women joined the welfare state, and some of the much more better off black women joined into being part of these jobs that were open up to black people through affirmative action. Now, the white supremacists, what they wanted to do was look to take the black man's opportunities away from him by emasculating the black man and offering the job to the black woman, and offering her that job allowed them to kill two birds with one stone, where they were able to hire the black woman and also be able to hire a minority, but this would keep money out of the black man's hands and keep him from having the economic power that he could use to improve the quality of life in his community. Now, when it came down to this whole thing, this was all done for an effort to socially engineer the kind of society that the white supremacists wanted. And what they wanted to do was, again, give the black woman power, because if she had economic power, then she could have economic power to be able to control the social aspects of the community and control the whole social narrative of the community. And as she looked to control the social aspects of the community, she was basically teaching her sons and daughters from Generation X how to socialize. And instead of them learning how to just be themselves and be black the way many of the baby boomers did during the Black Power movement, because the Black Power movement was all about teaching black people to be themselves and be accepted as they were. Instead, what happened in the late 1970s and 1980s was we had a lot of black people going down this road to conformity. And as they went down this road to conformity, it was all about trying to fit yourself into white society and fit yourself into the black boxes that were acceptable to white people. Now, this whole effort of conformity became an obsession for some black folks. It became a complete obsession because many people, just coming 25 years out of the civil rights movement, just coming 25 years out of the civil rights movement, they were thinking that they finally would have an opportunity to have their freedom. And what they wanted to do is go out here and make sure that there would be nobody out here coming out of line that could lead to reprisals from whites and non-blacks. They feared this reprisal, so they looked to try to make people conform to the standards that whites had created for black people and looked to force people into these boxes in an effort to have a smooth world. Unfortunately, when you try to force people to be in these boxes, a lot of times you're forcing people to become something that they're not. And when you force people to become something that they're not, what happens is that those people eventually wind up breaking. And that's what happened to a lot of people in the 1980s. A lot of people eventually, as they tried to keep conforming, eventually they wound up breaking. And as these people formed relationships with each other, they didn't even know the person that they were getting involved with. A lot of times with a lot of black people, when they were out here in the 1980s, a lot of people were putting on personas to fit themselves into the ideals of white society. And as they were putting on these ideals, a lot of times they were told that they had to be in a relationship. And as they were told they had to be in this relationship at an early age, they were told, you have to have a girlfriend. You have to be in a relationship on the male side. And on the female side, they were told you had to have a boyfriend. You had to be in a relationship. And it was something that was mandated socially. Again, mandated socially, you had to be with someone, and you had to be with someone who fit the standards of that black box that were acceptable to white people. And as people were conforming, they were looking to fit themselves into this box, one, to become what they felt would be acceptable to white people, and that basically put a lot of pressure on people. And then two, they were looking to force themselves into relationships with black women, and that basically led to two people who never got a chance to get to know who they were or find out who they were, getting involved with each other. And as they got involved with each other, they basically were not having a relationship with each other based on actual love. No, they were having a relationship based on obligation, and any relationship between two people that's based on obligation is destined to fail. And it's destined to fail because when you have a person who's involved with someone because they believe that they are obligated to do so, and possibly through coercion, that's not a healthy relationship. No, that's a person who feels forced to be in a relationship, and even worse, they're forced to be something that they're not. And this is what led to many black men and black women having extremely unsatisfying relationships. And as they had extremely unsatisfying relationships, basically when these two people eventually started to get closer to each other, they basically found out that they were involved with a stranger. And they found out that they were involved with a stranger because as they looked to try to form a relationship and try to build actual love, there was no love there. And there was no love there because this black man basically, one, did not know who he was because he was taking on a persona to fit himself into a black box that was acceptable to white people, and he didn't get a chance to get to know who he was or what he wanted in a relationship. And when it came down to that black woman, she was all going out here looking to get with a guy based on hypergamy and looking to get with a guy based on standards of commodification that she basically learned from the white feminists, and never really knew how to connect with a man emotionally, never knew how to connect and have a relationship with a man that would be one that she could form a personal, emotional, and spiritual connection with, because she was coerced by her peers to have this relationship with this guy because he was either light-skinned, cool, or had some money, and she never had a relationship with that man as a person. And in the case of the black man, instead of him looking to be a leader, he was looking to follow social standards and look to get the girl who he thought was the coolest or the prettiest, or basically was someone that his peers told him was right for him. And instead of him being able to make his own choice, he was told to be out here and again look to conform to the standards of what he was told was acceptable as related to who would be right for him. And this led to the foundations of an extremely unhealthy relationship between black men and black women. And as black men and black women were forced into these boxes, and again, when you force someone to be in relationships out of obligation, eventually this leads to the whole relationship breaking up, because the two people wind up broken, and the two people wind up broken because they're fitting themselves into things that are not who they are. And as they fit themselves into standards that are not who they are, what happens to that black man and that black woman is that they both become traumatized. And as they both become traumatized, this leads to them not looking to want to consider having a relationship with a black man or a black woman. And that is what led to the foundations of the complete collapse of black on black love in the 1980s. It basically led to a complete collapse because, again, a lot of the black boys were basically, again, raised by these single mothers. And as they were raised in the household with the single mother basically presented a model of relationships out of obligation, not out of actual love. And as these relationships were commodified, these women were looking for a man to basically be there to try to take care of her and her kids. And that again taught the boy that he needed to be in a relationship out of obligation, not out of actual organic dynamics where you again are learning about what you are and who you are and what you like in a relationship. Moreover, you're not learning about how to have standards as related to the type of woman you want to be involved with. No, you're learning that, oh, you have to be with this woman or you will have to deal with repercussions from your peers, whether it be verbal abuse and shaming language where people question your sexuality, or physical assault from people who again are upset about you not conforming and want to force you again into this whole situation, a situation that many young black teenage boys and teenage boys were not emotionally, mentally, or spiritually ready for. A lot of tween and teenage boys were forced into these whole ideas of relationships before they could find out who they were, because we wanted to conform these boys to the standards of white society, wanted to conform them to fit into these boxes for as related to who they were and who they had relationships with. And this did a lot of damage to the whole relationships between black on black relationships. And instead of black men and black women learning to love each other, what we got was a further divide with Generation X that did even more damage than anything as related to things, because what started the damage was, again, black women wanting to conform and some black men wanting to conform to white society because they wanted to be socially accepted, and they passed this culture of dysfunction down from the generations of the silent generation, who were their parents, to the baby boomer generation, to Generation X. And the Gen X damage is something many people don't think about, because the Gen X damage basically was the foundations of what we call the gender wars. And it was the foundations because, again, we had black boys, again, looking to conform, and black girls looking to conform to what was socially acceptable to white society. But what was conforming to white society was basically anti-black. And again, when it comes to white supremacy, they wanted to, again, reinforce this divide between black men and black women, and we really didn't learn how to have healthy relationships with each other like the generations before this, because the generations before this, again, they understood about organic relationships and people finally being allowed to a point to be who they were. I mean, some of the baby boomers who became a lot of the Black Power movement, some of them learned, okay, I can be myself, but many in Gen X never got that opportunity. No, we never got that opportunity to be who we really were, and being who you really are is very important as related to how you have relationships, because how you have relationships is based on who you really are, and as you become who you really are, this is where you learn that relationships are not about obligation. No, relationships are not about obligation at all. No one should feel forced to be in a relationship or something is wrong with them. No, relationships are something that happen over time, and they happen when a person is mentally, emotionally, and spiritually ready, not at a predetermined time the way black people were trying to force things, because what black people were trying to do was follow the standards of Madison Avenue in Hollywood, which told us that kids are supposed to be in relationships when they are in their tween and teen years. That's when they're supposed to discover girls. That's the Madison Avenue in Hollywood standard, but that's not the standard of humanity, because people all grow and mature at their own level. And as people grow and mature at their own level, this is where they start to form connections with people organically with each other. And that's where people learn about how relationships actually work as related to things like attraction, things like desire, things like chemistry. I mean, these are things that a 12-year-old or 13-year-old don't understand about relationships. They don't understand that people relate to each other based on these things. And sadly, what happened with a lot of Gen Xers is that as they were forced to conform, again, they were not true to their authentic selves. And as they were not true to their authentic selves, both the black boy and the black girl, again, not authentic to themselves, again, they were with each other out of obligation. And as they were with each other out of obligation, you were basically, again, looking to be with someone in order to impress your peers. But as you were with this person to impress your peers, and you were in a relationship with this person to impress your peers, what happened to that person is, as they were getting to know themselves and getting to know each other, this is how people wound up getting involved with someone, and were basically, if they further got closer together and they got married, or they were starting to get serious about dating, you finally realized that you were involved with a complete stranger. And you were involved with a complete stranger because this person never got that chance to go out here and find out who they really were. They were just going through these motions as related to conforming to the standards of dating and relationships told to them by Madison Avenue in Hollywood, that you had to have this money to impress this girl, or you had to, or this guy had to be a certain type of fly in order for you to be with them. But the whole thing is, you didn't really know yourself, and since you didn't know yourself, you didn't know who you really were. And since you didn't know who you really were, you basically were a stranger to yourself. And again, this is where people wound up having these relationships they were having became extremely unsatisfying, completely unsatisfying, because they did not meet the man and woman's spiritual and emotional needs. No, in most cases, men and women were together because they were considered to be socially accepted. And again, as this relationship became commodified, it became all about what the guy could spend or what the girl could get from the guy, as related to him giving her gold chains, giving her Gucci bags, and him having a girl on his arm who was pretty on his arm. And again, both partners were basically objectifying each other and using each other as attachments. And as they were using each other as attachments, they were not really connecting to each other as people. And eventually what happened was once they started to really get to know that person, they found out that this was a person that was a complete stranger to them, and because they came together in this relationship for all the wrong reasons. And when you come together in a relationship for all the wrong reasons, what happens is that the relationship is going to deteriorate, because you're fitting yourself into this box to be this persona that you are not. And as you're fitting yourself into this box to become something that you're not, what happens is eventually over time that facade starts to crack. And eventually, as the facade starts to crack and the lies get revealed to be the truth, this is where this whole person's world that was smooth starts to become rough, as both of these people break. And as both of these people break, eventually what happens is that they wind up breaking up. And that's what led to a lot of the deterioration of relationships in the 1990s. And many black women sitting there saying, "Oh, I can't find a good man." But the whole thing is that you don't understand how relationships work, and you didn't know how to just be yourself, because part of having a healthy relationship is you knowing who you are and knowing what you want. And many black women, sadly, they don't know who they are and don't know what they want. They sit there and talk about how they want a good man, but the whole thing is that you never experience what a man of God is, and you don't. And since you've never experienced this, you're still looking for this good man, this social construct created by Madison Avenue in Hollywood that does not exist. And since you're looking for this man who would conform to these standards, you're not finding any man. But the whole thing is, you don't see how conformity basically is destroying your ability to have a satisfying relationship, because you're looking for this guy who conforms to these standards. But this conformity is what's really keeping you from being with actual men. That's what happened to many black women. And on the black male side, it's the same thing. Many black boys who grew up in the 1980s, they grew up learning to conform and look for this ideal as related to black women. And actually, when they had to deal with real black women who basically didn't know who they were, they basically felt betrayed, they felt hurt, they felt like, oh, I can't have a relationship with many of these black women because they want, again, they want this guy who's an ideal. And basically the gangsters, the pookies, the dope boys basically were looking to fit themselves into these ideals. And since they had the money, this is why they were able to get the first pick, because this was all about conformity, all about social acceptance and fitting into the ideals of white society instead of being themselves. And this basically scarred many brothers out here as related to the relationships they had, because again, they were involved with a stranger, and as they were involved with this stranger, again, this woman expressed her contempt for him because she didn't see him as a person. No, she saw him as an attachment to elevate her social status and be a commodified attachment that would be social currency that would allow her to have wealth as related to being popular or being considered to be an ideal. And sadly, this basically traumatized a lot of black men as related to our relationships with black women, and made it where instead of black men seeing a black woman as someone who was lovable and someone who they could consider to be loved, they started to see a lot of contempt for black women, and that was shown all through the 90s as related to the narratives that were presented. I mean, even before that in the 80s, with narratives from like the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about the no good black man. Again, that's a narrative she wanted to push as related to fitting black men into black boxes that were acceptable to white people. And again, instead of us living our lives for ourselves the way Christ wants us to live, well, he really wants us to live for him, and again, wants us to have that abundant life that he wants us to have. What happened with many black people as we got into this conformity was, instead of us living for the standard of God and looking to live to serve God, many of us looked to live to serve white supremacy. And that's the great irony of the 1980s. Again, the 1980s were a period of progress as related to economics and things like that. But when it came down to us socially, we basically wound up regressing, and wound up regressing because we wound up looking to fit ourselves into white society, and looking to fit ourselves into white society started participating in idolatry, started participating in this idolatry, putting white standards above God and making them into a god, violating the first commandment, which was, "Ye shall have no other gods before me," and making white standards into a god and making it into an idol that basically led to black people not coming together under God, but winding up separating from each other in the foundations of a gender war where black men and black women were fighting with each other because they don't know who they are and are looking to conform to a standard of whiteness, and upset with each other because neither one conforms to this standard of whiteness, not understanding that white supremacy is anti-black and its business is war. And with its business being war, they don't want you to come together. No, they want to sell you the guns and the butter as you look to conform to the standards of a society that runs against you, been running against you for over 50 years. But the obsession with conformity is ironically the thing that drove us apart from each other. This obsession with fitting ourselves into white society, this obsession with fitting ourselves into black boxes that are acceptable to white people, this whole spellbound mindset basically makes it where we don't see each other as human beings that deserve to be loved and are deserving of love. That's what really was the sad part about the 1980s. Again, this obsession with conformity, and fitting yourself into an anti-black society. Again, this obsession with fitting yourself in, not understanding the society you're wanting to fit yourself into, basically was completely against you. They passively talk about including you and accepting you, but they're completely working against that standard. That's what basically flew over the heads of generations of black people in this quest for conformity. This quest for conformity that was basically to a point where people were looking to, again, physically coerce people into having relationships that they were not ready for. All of this conformity basically was the thing that it didn't bring black people together. It just drove a divide between us, that did damage to a lot of the stuff of the Black Power movement. Now, the Black Power movement was trying to teach us black on black love and teach the next generation black on black love. But all of that was undermined because of the quest for social acceptance into white society from the civil rights movement and the infiltrators who came into the black power movement. All of this did damage to the next generation, which was Generation X, as related to how we related to each other, and was passed down from generation to generation as related to how we saw each other, leading to this gender war divide. Again, people don't have relationships like the way we were forced to in the 1980s, where you have boys looking to force other boys into having relationships and girls telling other girls to be with the guy who is socially acceptable as related to popularity. No, relationships are something that are unique to people like fingerprints, and the way people come together with each other is supposed to be done in a healthy fashion. Again, everybody is not going to come into an interest with girls or boys at the same time. Usually everybody grows and progresses on their same level, and eventually they meet people based on their own interests, and they start to form personal and connections with people based on their energy as related to their spiritual energy, their vibe. I mean, these are the foundations of how people, form relationships with each other. It's all a thing that people have to learn and do on their own process and on their own time. And sadly, with a generation of Generation X, a lot of black people, we never got that opportunity to basically learn how to have a healthy relationship with a girl or a boy when we were in adolescence. We didn't learn, you don't just go out here and get with people based on trying to get people off your case. You don't get with people because that you just do things out of obligation. Oh, I have to get with this girl because I don't want the peers to come after me and do physical harm to me. Or you don't want to be ostracized as a girl because if you don't get with this guy, people will not want anything to do with you. No, relationships are not about other people. That's something that sadly a lot of black people do not understand. Relationships aren't about other people. They're about the two people who are in that relationship. It's about how those two people come together. And again, those two people are coming together for themselves, and they're coming together to serve God. They're coming together to serve God. And while the friends may not like who you are with, that's not for them to have a say in. No, you're not in that relationship for other people. You're in that relationship for each other. And you're in that relationship for each other, not to fit yourself into society, but you're in that relationship because what you want to do is go out here and do the work of God. That's what sadly happened with a lot of black people. They didn't learn this message early on, and no pastors preached this message. No fathers sat down and talked to their sons and let them know that relationships that you have with a girl are not because you feel like you have to have them out of obligation. No, you want to have them. I mean, it's very similar to the fulfillment of the law with Jesus' 2 commandments. I mean, those 2 commandments basically say to love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and spirit, and to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's a fulfillment of the law because you're not feeling like you have to follow the 10 commandments. No, you want to serve God. And since you want to serve God, you want to do things that meet God's standard, and you want to do things that meet God's standard in loving your neighbor as yourself, because if you love your neighbor as yourself, then you can love another person as you would yourself. And if you can love another person as you would yourself, then you can have a relationship that can allow both of you to enjoy the abundant life that Christ wants you to live. Christ wants you to live an abundant life. He wants you to have an abundance in a relationship where you grow closer to the woman or the man you're involved with and grow closer to God as you come together in God's order. That's what God wants for you. And sadly, a lot of us in the black community, we were taken off that road of true love that is taught in the gospel. We were taken off that true road of love that was in the gospel, looking to, again, commodify ourselves to fit into white society, looking to fit ourselves into this black box that's acceptable to white people, looking to try to fit ourselves into a white society, making their standard our God. That's the sad part of growing up in the 1980s. A lot of black people, we stopped looking to love each other the way God loves us, and look to love white society and look to be a part of conforming to a white society that basically runs against us, and that's kept us from coming together to love each other. And instead of us loving each other, we became strangers to each other, strangers to the point where we wound up becoming alienated from each other. And as we became alienated from each other, these spellbound black people basically have become adversaries instead of lovers. And that was the saddest part about growing up in the 1980s, was the complete collapse of black on black love, the complete collapse of black on black love, because black people wanted to conform to the standards of white supremacy, not ever understanding that those standards were anti-black, those standards were anti-black and anti-God. And basically, this is why we have people being gender warriors instead of being lovers of each other. Now, if you want to learn more about the spellbound mindset and the damage it did to the black community in the 1980s, you can pick up my book, Spellbound, and learn about the spellbound mindset and how we can overcome the spellbound mindset to get to the darker shade of black, where we set the standards as related to who we are and become the people who God wants us to actualize ourselves to be. And you can find that book on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find that book at other online booksellers like Barnes & Noble, Draft to Digital, Google Play, and other online booksellers all across the globe. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about the spellbound mindset and its impact on black culture and black society, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this all-new Spinsterella story. Pre-order your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella. Discover the dark side of love in this goth and lovely romance with Spinsterella. Get Spinsterella in paperback and e-readers at your favorite online bookseller today. Now available in paperback and Kindle, Vampires Stalk the Darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.